Okay. Right. Well, I'd like to welcome you all along to this meeting of the Finance and Resources Committee on 1st of February. It's the third under the new administration. You've had the housekeeping things from Audrey earlier on, and it's just the usual thing to keep your microphones on mute throughout the meeting unless you're speaking. And I think I'm getting used to it myself by now. And also use the chat box to attract my attention or that here of Kirsten. Right, first of all, do we have any apologies, Kirsten?
Yes, Convener. We have apologies from Councillor Chan with Councillor Braun substituting, Councillor Duff with Councillor Illingworth substituting, and Councillor Drysdale with Councillor Massey substituting. I think today we have all members in the chamber apart from the Provost. Can I just check if we have the Provost online?
Good morning, or good afternoon rather, sorry. Yes, I am here.
Thank you.
So, all present, including substitutes. Next, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Convener. Two declarations of interest. On item 9, I have a financial interest to the extent that my employer is involved in some of the lines of business that are discussed in that digital strategy. So I will recuse myself from that item. Item 10, I have a non-financial interest in my role as a trustee of Instrought Village Hall who applied for funds. So just like I did for the decision-making body, I'll recuse myself then. So I shall leave the chamber after item 8. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Declarations? Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Convener. Just a bit of guidance. I'm a board member of the Live Active Ledger, and I noticed it is a mention in the revenue budget. So guidance, do I need to declare a non-financial interest at that level? No. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Else? Councillor Stewart.
Given that Bailey has mentioned it, I guess I will declare a connection in item 10 on the Community Investment Fund, as I'm a board member of somebody who applied to it, but I properly declared and recused myself at the decision-making point, and as this is for information, I don't feel the need to absent myself from the chamber during discussion of the item.
No, I think in terms of the SIF, it's just not required. No, I don't think so. But I think with Bailey's earlier point with regard to his IT involvement, then that is certainly germane and relevant. Any other declarations? I think we just about covered everyone. Okay. Next point is minutes of the previous meeting. Can we agree those minutes, or are there any specific points people want to raise? Are we agreed? Right. Agreed. Okay, we move on to the next item, and that is outstanding business statements. Can I ask for any comments? What I would say is the only, you will have noticed there was a elected members briefing went out. It's quite a thorough and detailed briefing from Claire Mailer, I think yesterday. And the only one that's not yet been completed is an update to members regarding underspend on the Health and Social Care Partnership. But I believe Jackie Pepper is online. So could I just ask Jackie for an update?
Yes, thank you very much, Convener. Yeah, there was a request for further information in relation to the reported underspend, which is mainly in older people's services. And I'm able to report that the underspend was driven largely by slippage arising from the development of new living well teams, which is a care at home initiative to invest in new models of care at home. So there was a 200,000 underspend in relation to that, as that was taken as recruitment was underway, and that was part of our older people's strategic delivery plan and part of a £6 million investment plan approved by the IJB. There's also slippage in relation to mainly health developments of £700,000, and all of that's reported in our winter plan reporting. We also have some slippage in care home placements and also in our daycare services, which are day opportunities, and some external transport underspends. And those are both associated by a shift in demand profile with the numbers of people choosing not to take up those placements. And that issue is part of our ongoing strategic planning and discussions with members of the IJB. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Are you likely to be sending out a written note just to amplify your comments?
Yes, thanks, Convener. I'm happy to follow that up in a written report and apologise for the lateness of that, but you will be aware that we've had a changeover from with the departure of the Chief Finance Officer, Jane Smith, and Interim Chief Finance Officer, Donna Mitchell, taking up posts. I apologise for the delay, but I'm happy to follow that up in writing. Thanks.
Thank you, and that would be helpful. And I do appreciate not just with the changeover finance officer, but you've had quite a number of kind of detailed meetings just over the last week to 10 days. So I know there's been a lot on your plate. Can I just ask on the other, in total on the outstanding business statements, and there were 4, does anyone have any comments, anything they want to note, or can we just note them? Okay. Then we will now move on to item 5 on the agenda, and that's the revenue monitoring report. And I'm going to ask Scott Walker to speak to this. Scott, you're online. Could you introduce the report?
Okay, thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, councillors. This is the 3rd revenue monitoring report for 22-23 and is based on the November ledger. Across the council, we're currently projecting an overspend of just under £1.6 million. This is an increase of around £300,000 from the last update in November, and I'll set out the movements shortly. The projections included in this update are based on 8 months of actual data and will be further refined throughout the financial year. We will provide a further update in the last revenue monitoring report of the year that is scheduled for April. Turning to section 5 of the report, we provide an update on service revenue budgets. The projected underspend in education and children's services has reduced by £155,000, and there are 2 main reasons for this net movement. The projected overspend on expenditure on young people for whom the council is a corporate parent and who require residential care has increased due to increased need for this service. This is partially offset by underspends on staff costs and transport costs, as well as additional income. Within the devolved school management scheme, there is a projected underspend of £777,000, which represents 0.7% of the overall DSM budget. And currently, we are projecting a £300,000 underspend on the Pupil Equity Fund. Across the community service, the underspend has reduced by a net £27,000. However, within this relatively small movement, there are several variances that merit further mention. We're currently projecting an overspend of £1.2 million on winter maintenance based on activity to date, as well as £150,000 on a response to other weather-related events throughout the year. These are partially offset by additional income from planning and building warrant fees and road network fees, as well as underspends on street lighting, energy and maintenance, traffic and network, and community green space. In addition, continued proactive workforce management measures are generating further staff savings. Across corporate and democratic services, we're now projecting a net overspend of £874,000, which is a movement of £58,000 based on updated projections on energy, property maintenance and staff costs. Turning now to section 6, we provide an update on the corporate budgets. At paragraph 6.1 and 6.2 and appendix 3, we provide a summary of the Perth and Kinross Health and Social Care Partnership position, and the Integration Joint Board will receive a further update on this on the 13th of March. From paragraph 6.3, we provide an update on council tax collection performance, and to the end of December, we'd collected 82% compared to 81.73% last year. Paragraph 6.11, the report provides an update on the potential financial challenges being experienced by Tayside Contracts. At this time, we are still just identifying a potential risk to the council, and officers continue to engage with colleagues from Tayside Contracts on the options available to reduce this pressure. If the situation does not change significantly, as the report sets out, there may be a requirement to call an executive subcommittee to agree our response. Section 7 includes an update on the housing revenue account, as well as an update on the latest financial projections for Live Active Leisure. Section 8 includes information on additional revenue support grant of £1.536 million and other funding of £3.698 million, which is further detailed in Appendix 5. And finally, Section 9 sets out several adjustments between budget headings that result in no change in the level of council spend, and Section 10 includes proposed adjustments to reserves. Within Section 10, there is a proposal to underwrite the development plans of the Scottish Crannog Centre up to the value of £210,000, specifically related to their contingency. If this funding is required, officers will bring back a proposal to elected members along with a funding solution which may involve the use of reserves. Convener, colleagues and I are available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Can I ask, are there any questions? And I can see straight away there's a question from Bailey Ahern. Bailey Ahern, followed by Councillor Rebick, who's 2 questions. I'll take your second question for Ron, and then Bob Brown, Councillor Braun, again 2 questions. I'll do the same again. Okay, Bailey.
Thank you very much, Convener. My question is on the section 10 on the Crannog Centre and the underwriting of a contingency of 210,000. Paragraph 1018 says that they're satisfied there is minimal risk that the contingency will be needed. Can we just get an idea what they define as minimal risk?
I have an update from Barbara Renton. Oh, Fiona Robertson.
Thank you, Convener. We, as you'll see in the report, Councillor Ahern, we have said that we will carry out an audit of the contract paperwork for this project, the Crannog Centre redevelopment project, just to make sure we are absolutely clear that any risks in terms of the project are identified and discussed with the Crannog in advance. We've also had a discussion with them about how the project can be value engineered to keep any overspend to a minimum. This is a good project. Like many other capital projects, at the moment it has been victim to tender price inflation and some other factors.
Councillor Ahern, Bailey Ahern, sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, that was just part of my concern, was that is it going to be used to cover inflation, or are the original figures that they put in for what they see is going to be the cost, does that cover the inflation costs?
Fiona Robertson.
The expectation of the Crannog Centre at the moment is they hope not to call them contingency, Bailey Ahern, but as I say, we will go through all the tender price documentation with the Crannog Centre. if committee approves this underwriting request this afternoon, to make sure that any risks and issues in the final contract price are ironed out as far as possible.
Okay, thank you. Right, I shall now move on to Councillor Rebick, and then it's a question from Councillor Shears.
Thank you, Convener. Apologies in advance if I've asked similar questions before, but it's just in relation to PEF underspend, and it alludes to the fact in the papers that sometimes that's down to the academic year and the financial year being different. Is it also true to say that sometimes that'll be as a result of good planning, where materials or service or human resource has been sourced for future? So in other words, the money is not spent, but it's nonetheless committed. Is that true? And is it also true sometimes of devolved school managements as well in respect of what head teachers are doing? Thank you.
Right, I think probably Sheena Devlin here, or perhaps Greg Boland. Which of you wishes to?
Thank you. I'm happy to take the question, Convener. Councillor Rebick, as you're right, as stated in the paper, that there's the mismatch, if you like, between the allocation of the pupil equity funding, which is done by financial year, whereas expenditure is planned for and incurred over the course of an academic year. So we do tend to find that there is a bit of drag in relation to that. However, as also stated in 511, we are keen that schools do try and use all of the allocation of PEF within the academic year, because that particular grant is for the number of children who are in schools who are entitled to free school meals because of qualifying benefits at that point, but that there can still be some drag. And you're absolutely right in relation to the fact that both with the pupil equity funding and with devolved school management funds, that there will be a spend plan that goes along with school improvement planning. And so while expenditure may be committed, it may not yet have been spent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we now move on to, and I know Councillor Rebick, you've got a further question later, Councillor Shires, and then Councillor Braun for his first question. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Convener. My question is at 5.8 on page 13 of the report, and it's to get an understanding around the overspend in terms of residential care for young people with needs. Is this something that we're expecting to see increase? I'm presuming, although I'm sure Ms Devlin will keep me right, that this is in relation to the outcomes of the pandemic. But as we've tried to have transformation projects to move away from use of residential care, just trying to get an understanding of what the situation is. Is it likely to increase, and will the budget increase along with it? Thank you.
Could I ask Sheena Devlin?
Thank you, Convener. Councillor Shires, in relation to the question there, you're absolutely right that we did, over a period of time, introduce an alternative approach, which was about the earliest of intervention and prevention through what we called our REACH work. And what we saw pre-pandemic was a very positive impact of REACH in terms of reducing an overspend that we had year on year in the area of providing particular residential placements for those young people with some of the greatest need. Unfortunately, over the course of the pandemic, and we're 3 years into that pandemic and still feeling the impact and the effect that the periods of lockdown and all the associated restrictions that went with that on those who were particularly already most disadvantaged or had the greatest needs. And that impact is manifesting itself in a range of different ways. In relation to residential care, what we have seen is an increase in requirement for that. We had previously budgeted on an annual basis for anything between sort of 10 and 13 residential placements, and we're probably sitting just over 20 just now. So we have taken a range of approaches to divert existing resource into this area. We have also benefited from some additional staffing that has been reported through finance and resources as well to support in this area, but we are still seeing significant pressures in that area, and that's something that we will likely be bringing to a future finance and resources committee in future if that situation does not change, and we're not seeing that that's likely to let up anytime soon. And the impact of the pandemic, of course, has not just been felt on those families and children and young people, it's also manifested itself in a range of other things. So we've had some challenges in recruiting to staff, where we've had staff vacancies, where we've had absences, whether that's through illness, maternity leave, or indeed staff leaving to take up new posts. And all of these things have compounded in seeing a rise in demand in this area. But I would just want to reassure members of this committee that we are taking all active and necessary approaches to try and manage and mitigate this. But we are seeing significant challenges in this area, and as I say, more information likely to be brought to a future committee in due course if we don't see a downward trend manifesting itself. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's a fairly thorough response, but Councillor Shars, are you? Yeah. Right, next question is, first question from, and what I would say is, I think one thing we don't want to do is go into a whole lot of the detail that's going to get caught up in the budget over the next month. But and we've got quite a bit on the agenda today. But Councillor Braun, your first question, and then followed by Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. My question relates to paragraph 517 on page 14. Additional income from planning and building warrant fees. I'm just wondering, is this because we have had more applications in than we expected? Or is it because current applications are passing through much quicker, and therefore obviously fees are coming in quicker, and therefore at some stage there will be a shortfall following behind that?
Can we have a response from Barbara?
It is very much about, we've had additional planning applications in, and we've dealt with more building warrants than we were expecting in terms of the budget set.
Thank you, Convener.
Does that suffice? Right. Councillor Forbes, followed by first question from Peter Barrett, Councillor Barrett.
You can call me Peter Stewart. Para 10.4 refers to resignations being the reason for part of the 450,000 underspend. This is the first time that I can recall the use of such a description or reason rather than staff turnover and vacancies. Can I ask, what's the particular problem causing the resignation of graduates, which is stated on Appendix 2 on page 29 of the pack, and what is being done to address it in early years?
Peter, could you just give us the first part of it again? It was Councillor Forbes was before you, and you caught us out. So it was just if you could give us the paragraph number, because I missed it. Thank you.
Apologies.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, certainly. Paragraph 10.4 of the covering report, and then Appendix 2, page 29, refers to graduate resignations in early years in childcare.
Can we have a response? Gina Devlin.
I think I don't know, Councillor Barrett, the reason why the word resignations has been particularly included in that paragraph, and I would need to find out the detail to understand if there have been a significant amount of resignations in there. But within the paragraph there are also a range of other matters that go towards explaining the underspend around delays in recruitment, lower expected costs than we previously budgeted for. It talks about posts in primary one and family support, but your specific question was about resignations. I would need to find that out and provide information to committee to explain the reason for that word being included. Thank you.
Does that suffice? And we'll get a written response with more detail. Councillor Forbes, sorry about that earlier, and it's now for your turn, and then followed by Councillor Collins Stewart.
Thanks, Convener, no problem. Paragraph 5.16 refers to the commercial waste income projections, and it made me wonder, has any work been done, or do we have any information on what effect the deposit return scheme will have on the income stream in the waste department?
Barbara Renton.
I think Sheila Best may be on the call, and Sheila would be best able to describe that.
Okay, Sheila Best.
Hi there. Yeah, we've done some initial modelling work a couple of years ago, but we need to do updates on that because obviously market conditions have changed since then. So that is currently under review at the moment.
Councillor Forbes, suffice. Okay, next question is from Councillor Stewart, then followed by Councillor Parrott.
Thanks, Convener. I wanted to ask about the council approved expenditure detailed in paragraphs 10.9 to 10.12 and appendix 6. And just to double check, notwithstanding any decision that we made today or any decision that we made on a similar list back in November, should we decide to put these in earmarked reserves today, we can still take them out of earmarked reserves in 4 weeks' time on budget day without breaching the 6-month rule or anything like that.
I think Scott Walker.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yes, Councillor Stewart, you will get an opportunity to review that when you consider the revenue budget and reserve strategy on the 1st of March.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Parrott. And then we will go back and I'll take the last 3 questions from those who indicated they wanted to ask 3 questions. But Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. Can we return to the Scottish Crannog Centre virtually, if not physically at the moment? I thoroughly support the facilitating the redevelopment of the Crannog Centre as a tourist attraction. But can I ask if any of the contingency funding is used, is that reclaimable from the Crannog Centre at a future time when they're in a position to pay it? And also, if they, sorry, do we have rules and regulations again for making this sort of provision? I just have a concern that is there any matter of precedent setting here? Thank you.
Fiona Robertson, and I think there's 2 aspects clearly to that question.
Thanks, Convener. Scott Walker might want to comment as well. In response to your question, Councillor Parrott, that's not currently a condition of grant. The proposal is that we underwrite up to the sum of 210,000 if the Crannog Centre needs that because its current contingency is not sufficient for the project to proceed. The committee can consider and apply an additional condition of funding if it wishes, which is just to safeguard any clawback of council funds if you feel that additional safeguarding is needed, but Scott might want to comment.
Scott.
I would just add that we would bring back any proposals in the report. This is just seeking an underwriting. There will be a full report if this is required, and all that would be set out in that report to this committee.
I'm going to ask the Vice Convener and Council Leader to comment.
I think it was my understanding earlier, it might help the committee if they understood that because we are willing to make the commitment to underwrite, the other partners are also willing to do that. So it made the amount of underwriting of contingency a lot less because other partners were willing to come on board because it's such an important project. So I was just, that's my understanding, Fiona.
That's correct, Vice Convener.
Okay, thank you. Right. Councillor Parrott? You okay? Right, and we've 3 final questions. Councillor Rebick, followed by Councillor Braun.
Thanks again, Convener. Just on a broad question in respect of devolved school management's, the school management budget. I think it's entirely appropriate that these budgets are devolved to head teachers. Nobody knows a school better than the senior leadership team in those schools. Sometimes it feels like a lot of money, but am I correct in thinking that a lot of it's kind of spent already? And I'm just wondering to what extent actually there are lots of funds available to head teachers with regard to DSM. Thanks.
Sheena Devlin.
Thank you, Convener. Councillor Rebick, in relation to the devolved school management budgets, the total that is attributable, for example, to staff costs across the totality of the budgets accounts for about 90%. So although that money is devolved to schools and to head teachers, 90% of those budgets are for staff costs. And in terms of areas within devolved school management money that schools would not have the latitude to be able to spend across nursery, primary and special schools, there is no latitude around salaries and on-costs for all schools. It's property costs, things like that, central supplies and services for licenses, TV licenses, etc. You know, none of that is expenditure that is at the head teacher's discretion. So there's actually a very small amount of devolved school management budget that is at head teacher's discretion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And because my screen hadn't scrolled down, there are 1 or 2 other councillors with further questions. But I'm going to take just now Councillor Braun, followed by Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. My second question is relating to item 610 regarding non-domestic rate collection. As the figures show at the moment, it's pretty static compared to last year. But I'm just wondering, obviously many businesses are still on fixed rate contracts with their energy suppliers, and those contracts are going to be coming to an end. Is this figure likely to become more volatile given the increased costs that businesses are going to incur because of the change in energy prices? I can use myself as an example. Our energy costs have gone up 3 times from next month. We're just a small corner shop, so any other bigger business must be incurring, expecting to incur bigger costs as the year goes on. And also, will we be having some form of assistance for businesses which have a problem paying their rates?
No, Lynn Brady. Lynn?
Hello, hi. With regards to the first part of the question, I can't give an answer with any certainty, but what I would say is the reality is, yes, I do think that as pressure and inflation and cost of living brings problems, widespread problems, I do think that businesses will find it more difficult to pay all their bills, including non-domestic rates. And that's something that myself and my colleagues are keeping a close check on and encouraging businesses to contact us. With regards to any help or assistance, my colleague Kevin Fraser could probably answer that best with regards to what may be happening in the next financial year. If that's all right, if I pass on to Kevin for the second part.
Okay, Kevin Fraser.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Good afternoon. We have yet to see the legislation that's going to affect non-domestic rates for next year. We expect it to come out on the 9th of February. But what we've seen so far is there is no intention to have anything that replicates the retail, leisure and hospitality schemes. But we do think there will be some transition as part of the revaluation exercise and also the continuation of the small business bonus scheme. But we are yet to see anything specifically related to energy costs that may come into play next year.
I think Scott Walker was also wanting to come in here.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I just wanted to provide an update on today's figures. So we got the performance to the end of January this morning, and it's actually ahead of last year. We're sitting at just under 89% compared with just under 86% this time last year.
Is that sufficient? Right. The next person for question is Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, convener. Question follows on from Councillor Stewart's regarding paragraphs 10.9 to 12. I wanted to know what the likelihood of the council agreed projects in Appendix 6, which came to £410,000, which haven't been implemented this year. What's the likelihood that they will be implemented next year, or are the same problems going to beset them of capacity and consultation? In which case, you know, keeping that money in those pots is going to be completely useless. You know, have these projects been overtaken by events and other pressures? It seems to be that we're being asked to make a decision on these projects in a kind of vacuum of any information.
Okay, Scott Walker.
Thanks, convener. So the expectation is that the money will be spent next year. That's what services are asking for based on their information. However, as we said earlier, that can be reviewed when we update the reserves position on the 1st of March. Perhaps we can bring more information to you through the budget review groups.
That suffice. Okay. Okay. As far as I can see, we have 3 further questions to take from Councillor Forbes, from Baillie Ahern, and then from Councillor Illingworth. And then I think we want to move on to the comments. Okay, so Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, convener. I'm back to 5.16 again, and it's the underspend in things like traffic and network and flood risk studies. Is that due to lack of staff resource, or is it just other things that are on the go at the moment?
Okay.
If I can come in, convener.
Yeah, sure.
It is additional grant income, Councillor Forbes. So it's one of these peculiar things. It's noted as an underspend, but it actually is additional income.
Right. Baillie Ahern, and in fact, I think you have 2 questions. I think we'll just take them together, and then Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you very much, convener. And hopefully the first one is just a yes or no answer. And it's with regards to paragraph 6.9 and the council tax reduction scheme. I know it's down to local authorities to implement it, but is it not down to the Scottish Government? Do they not fund the council tax reduction scheme? And if so, will it not be there won't be an overspend for the council?
I'm going to ask Scott Walker on this.
So the answer is no. It's part of our overall funding package. That is the council budget that we apply to it. So it's our overspend.
Thank you. I thought it'd be a yes or no answer.
The second question.
And the second question is on paragraph 522 with regards to the Chief Executive Service. And I just wondered, the very last comment there in there, that small paragraph is additional income. And I just wondered how the Chief Executive Service actually produced an income.
I think again, Scott. Yes.
Yep, thank you. I'm just scrolling to find the appendix because hopefully it's in there.
I could maybe give an answer on that.
Oh, sorry, Claire Miller, thank you.
Yeah, just in answer to that question, you'll be aware that in July of last year, myself and the innovation team moved over to the Chief Executive Service, and with us came the equalities team. So the additional income is actually from refugee money that's funding from a post and some translation fees that we received. I think that's right, Scott, is that correct?
Yep, thank you, Claire.
Right, last question. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, convener. Is it possible to have an explanation of why there's an overspend in roads maintenance this winter? It's not been a particularly brutal winter, so that'd be quite helpful to understand.
I think initially Barbara Renton. Good call. Okay, Stuart.
Thank you, convener. Thank you, Councillor Anworth. It's not been a particularly severe winter, but we have had prolonged periods of cold weather. We have been looking at our statistics, and we have been doing more afternoon pre-grits and early morning de-ices down to the colder, wetter weather. If it's marginal, hovering around 1 degrees down to -1, -2, there's a requirement to treat more often than there is if we've got a prolonged periods of really cold, dry weather. So it's a combination of that, and obviously inflationary increases in terms of providing the service in the first place.
I'm also going to allow the council leader to make a.
I think. Thanks. I've been looking at that over the last few years, and I think it's because we maybe do not set a realistic winter maintenance budget, because we always underestimate, and maybe it's up to us as elected members to, as we formulate our budget, instead of having overspends every year, actually when we set our budget, put in a more a figure that's more likely to be used rather than as a balancing figure to make the budget. So I think some of it falls down to all of us in previous years with setting the budget for wind maintenance.
Okay, Councillor Anworth.
Yep, thank you for that.
Okay, and thank you, Stuart, for your comment. There being no further questions, I'm going to just make some comments. This is the third revenue monitoring report, as I mentioned earlier, for the current financial year, and it's based on activity up until the end of November. Scott Walker, as our Chief Accountant, has already given you an update on the contents of the report and gives a detailed analysis and commentary on the financial performance of our services overall. Whilst we are reporting a small overspend across services, this includes a projected overspend of 1.2 million, as we've just referred to, on winter maintenance. And across corporate budgets, we are now reporting a variation of 1.5 million. Taken together, the council is now projected to overspend by just under 1.6 million in the current financial year. But that is based on the November ledger, and also we'll get a further update at the next meeting of Finance and Resources on April 26th, and we've obviously got the papers going in for the budget process. The report also includes commentary on a couple of other issues, and I just want to make a few words, say a few words. First of all, it does give a further update on the issues facing a number of our partners, in particular Tayside Contracts and Live Active Leisure. And was mentioned earlier on, it may well be that there will require to be a meeting of the executive subcommittee of Finance and Resources with regard to Tayside Contracts, but we need to find out more information. Secondly, it also includes the proposal to underwrite the redevelopment plans at the Scottish Cranach Centre up at Loch Tay, and we've commented on that already. I do think it's a really important development for the tourist industry in Highland Perthshire and beyond, and I hope it's a project that the whole council can get behind. These are challenging times for our services. I'd like to record my thanks to the Chief Executive and staff across the whole of the council for the continued efforts, and we will have obviously further updates throughout the course of this financial year. So I'd like to note the paper, but I'd like to ask, are there any, we've had questions, are there any comments? Okay, can we note the paper? Sorry, Billy.
I think it would be remiss to move away from this item without remarking on the fact that we the council very unfortunately ends up almost £250,000 better off as a result of the teacher strike day that happened last year, and that we benefit to the tune of that similar number for each extra strike day that happens. It's a crying shame that we end up as a financial beneficiary of the strikes. And I think it's incumbent on all those elected members to figure out a way of spending that money in a very equitable way when the opportunity arises in the budget meeting in a month today. Thank you, convener.
Just to say and I think we hear entirely what you say. That is a so-called benefit that we most assuredly do not want, and we will factor that into account. Okay. Councillor Barrett, do you wish to comment?
Just very briefly, convener, as you just pointed out, we are being asked to note a lot of things in this report, but the report also asks us to agree a number of actions, which seems to be kind of omitted from the conclusions or the recommendations of the report. So maybe that can be addressed in future. So we aren't just noting a paper, we are agreeing the actions.
I'm saying in terms of noting the paper is also agreement and approval of the actual actions set out in the paper. So can we have agreement? No dissent, right. Sorry? Yeah. We move on to paper number 6, and I would ask Stuart Mackenzie to present this report.
Thank you, convener, and good afternoon, councillors. This report provides an update on progress of the council's approved capital budget and housing investment programme based upon expenditure to the end of December. As set out in section 3, gross expenditure in the General Fund programme over the 6 years to 2027-28 is currently estimated at approximately £696 million. In December, the Council approved the full business case for the replacement of Perth High School and allocated an additional £11.5 million to allow the project to progress towards financial close. This, together with movements in grant funding, third-party contributions and the Prudential Borrowing Programme, result in a net increase in expenditure of £8.2 million over a position approved by committee in November. Section 4 and appendices 1 and 2 to the report detail progress of the General Fund programme to date, together with recommended adjustments to the budget. Net expenditure in the General Fund programme to the end of December was approximately £55.3 million, equivalent to 47% of the proposed revised budget for the current year. Following its approval by Council, the budget for the Perth High School replacement project has been aligned to the delivery plan, with £24.8 million rephased out of the current year into future years. Adjustments have also been identified in respect to phasing of school refurbishment and improvement works, the bridge refurbishment programme, flood protection schemes, and property compliance and software licensing budgets, amongst others. A comprehensive review has been undertaken of the fleet vehicle replacement programme, with a proposed reduction in the overall budget of £3.7 million. As members will be aware, the Council was advised in January that it had been unsuccessful in its application for £10 million of Levelling Up grant for the Perth Eco Innovation Park. Section 5 and Appendix 3 of the report details progress of the Housing Investment Programme. Net expenditure on the housing programme to the end of December was approximately £8.2 million, equivalent to 43% of the proposed revised budget for the current year. Approval is sought for a minor adjustment to the budget for the conversion of a property in Rannoch Road, Perth. A new appendix, Appendix 4, has been added to the report to provide elected members with an overview of progress on the delivery of major capital projects. The appendix sets out the budgeted expenditure and current projected outturn on these projects, their anticipated completion date, their status in terms of contract award, whether works have commenced on site, and any significant change since the previous monitoring report. It is intended to keep this appendix updated and report on an exception basis where there are changes in the status of major projects, such as in forecast cost, scope, or completion date. As an example, the Executive Director Communities has provided a more detailed update on progress with the delivery of the Conway Flood Protection Scheme, which is included in section 4 of the report. Subject to the approval of the adjustments set out within the report, projected outturn expenditure on the General Fund programme at the end of the current year is estimated at approximately £117.6 million, or 85% of the budget approved in April. The projected outturn position for the Housing Investment Programme is estimated at approximately £19 million, or 106% of the budget approved in April. Happy with colleagues to take questions, Convener.
Thank you, Stuart. Before we move to questions, I just think in terms of due process, with the revenue budget, I should have asked, I moved the report and for the report to be agreed. What I should have asked at that point was for a seconder. Could I have a seconder?
Happy to belatedly second.
Right, and that's my error. And I think we had agreed the report. Right, and there was no dissension from that. On the capital budget, can I ask, are there any questions? I'm not seeing any. They are coming in now. First of all, Bailey.
Thank you, Convener. My question is actually about something that isn't in the report, but don't worry, it is on topic. So in previous years, these similar reports have reported significant underspend on roads maintenance, which has then been moved to other areas. Does the omission of that this year mean that we're on track to spend all allocated monies on roads maintenance? Thank you.
I'm going to ask if it's on roads maintenance again, Stuart Dahl and also Stuart Mackenzie.
Thank you, Convener. In terms of road maintenance spend this year, yeah, we're on track to spend our full budget on the roads network for resurfacing, patching, overlays, etc. That's all on track to be fully spent.
Great, thank you. That's great news. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. I'd like to ask about the projects under the Perth and Kinross placemaking heading in Appendix 2, which is on page 63 of our document packs. I know the answer to this first question, but I think it might just help. Can I check that Perth Place People is the proposed improvements to the Dunkeld Road corridor? Executive Director Renton might want to reply to that.
I can confirm that it is the funding for the Dunkeld Road linked to the Sustrans project.
Thanks. I think it just helps when something is sort of rather broadly described to just clarify the point and make it clear for everybody. And the second one under there, I was aware at the early on in the last council term, there was a glossy brochure which described what the Perth and Kinross lighting action plan was to be. What I don't recall seeing at any point up or since then is an update on where we are with the lighting action plan and what what phases have been completed, what works have been completed. I mean, I know obviously we've got the bridge lit up in St Paul's and so on, but what are the phases that have been done and what are the phases that are coming next?
I think again, Barbara Renton.
I think that that's a very fair point, Councillor Stewart. There has been a lot of activity, particularly around about Mill Street and the works that we've done in terms of the projections there, as well as the lighting up of St Paul's, the bridge, St Matthews as well, but we can certainly bring a report back to EI and ED committee, which is where it sits naturally in terms of the work.
Thanks. Thank you. Right, and now Councillor Rebick.
Thank you again, convener. It's point 5.3 on page 50. Am I right in thinking that the conversion of the Foreman Driving Test Centre at 111 Rannoch Road, Perth, is to be for, I'm probably going to get this phrase wrong, but it's assisted living accommodation, I think.
Who's going to, Barbara again?
I believe so, Councillor Rebick, but I'll just double check with officers and post a comment in the chat.
Thank you.
Okay, right, and then Councillor Forbes, followed by the Vice Convener, Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Convener. I'm sure you know what I'm going to be asking about. It's on 4.3.2 and it's regarding the adopted roads. I'm delighted to hear Stuart say that the huge amounts of money the previous administration put into roads is on track to be spent, so that's good. But the specific point, a road to an adoptable standard, is that one road in particular or a group of roads, or is that confidential information that can't be shared in public?
I can confirm it's one particular road that's referred to in this particular report.
I must have missed that, thank you.
Okay, right, Councillor Lane.
Thanks. It's to go back to Councillor Bailey's question about spending all the money in the road maintenance budget, which I think is good also. But I was just wondering if that was an increase in volume of what we normally did, or is it because of inflation that we spent all the money? So it may not be as good news as we thought. So I was wondering really what the proportion of that spend has been eaten up by inflation, if anything.
I think Stuart Dahl, but may come to Stuart McKenzie too.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, there's been a significant inflation in the construction industry over the course of the last year, so it's a combination of getting additional works down on the ground and the increased cost of actually physically doing the work. Yeah.
Right, next question is from Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. I'm on page 72 of the report. I'm looking at the spreadsheet. I'm hoping I'm reading this right. Fire precaution measures in our properties. The funding ends this year, so I'm just asking, have we now completed that programme? Because I think at one stage we were utilising forced entry to get this finalised. So I just want to check we have finished now.
Barbara.
As was noted at Housing and Social Wellbeing Committee last week, then not all of that work has been completed. I think that there's a very small number of properties and we are looking at forced entry approaches to those to complete the programme.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, and I notice in the chat that Councillor Forbes wishes to move an amendment, but we'll come on to, first of all, I'd like to move the paper and this time to ask for seconder. I think just to point out, this report is based on activity across council services up until the end of December last year. Head of Finance has already provided committee with a commentary in the contents of this capital monitoring report. I just want to make one or two additional remarks. First of all, the budget before the committee today recognises the additional 11.5 million investment in Perth High School, and this investment by this council, this SNP-led council, will ensure that children both now and in the future enjoy the best learning environment we can provide. Also, I think it's only right and proper that the approved capital budget remains realistic. That is why, as in the case in previous years, there are several adjustments between financial years to ensure the delivery of our capital budget, amounting to just short of 700 million. We remain absolutely committed to the delivery of the approved capital budget, but it's inevitable we are going to face tough choices over coming months. And we can't lose yet, nonetheless, we can't lose sight of the scale of our ambition going ahead. An ambition that sees almost 700 million invested in schools, in our roads, our bridges, our buildings, and other infrastructure across the entire council area. And it's an investment I think will be welcomed by our citizens, by businesses and visitors alike. The report, I'd also point out, sets out almost 84 million of expenditure on the housing investment programme over the next 5 years. I'd also point out, and I think it's worth noting, and this comes from the Finance and Resources Committee before last, is Appendix 4. And that is, it sets out all of the, it's a progress update on all of the significant capital projects. And with exception reporting, we will continue to give an update on projects that have been delayed. And you'll see in this report, one I've been asking about for over many years, and that's the Comrie Flood Protection Scheme. But we will hold to that, and each quarter there will be this progress report. I think the way it's been done here, I think is actually good. And I think it sets out, it's kind of précis of the various points and aspects, and then, you know, I think we can focus better going forward. Last but not least, I'd like to really just thank officers across the council, in particular the finance team, for all their efforts, and it really is going to be challenging over the next few months. But I wish to move the paper. I'd like to seek a seconder.
Thank you, convener. Happy to second report. Happy to reaffirm our ambition, as I'm sure everybody in the room will wish to support the ambition of this council moving forward. But we have to, unfortunately, tinge it with a bit of pragmatism, as we're going to be facing difficult choices both in our capital and revenue budget going forward. And I know that everybody within this room will strive to get the best outcomes when they're looking at their capital and revenue budget for our citizens, which is the most important. I too welcome more transparency by the idea brought forward by the independent group as well as others to have a clear understanding of where we are with capital projects. Sometimes in the past, and I'm not talking about last administration, but since I've been here, we pass large sums of money to a project and then we don't see where it's going for months and months and months. So I think that's welcome for everybody, and for new elected members, they'll be used to it, whereas some of us have been here for a while see this as an innovation. I think that's helpful for all groups to understand where we are. So yeah, still an ambitious council, still want to do what we can, but we'll have to tinge it with a touch of pragmatism. Thank you. Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Right. We do have one comment from Councillor Stewart, but first of all, I believe we have an amendment from Councillor Forbes. Can you give us details of your amendment? I've not seen anything on this in advance.
Thanks, convener. It's a very straightforward amendment, and I don't think you'll be at all surprised. It relates to a topic I've talked about many times before. 4.3.7 references the slippage in the scheme to renew and invest in our play parks. As you know, convener, there is a manifesto commitment by the Scottish Government to renew every play park in Scotland, which of course includes Perth and Kinross, within the lifetime of the current Parliament, which is something like 3.5 years, which I work out to be something like 1,000 days or something like that, so not a great deal of time. So my amendment has been forwarded to committee services, and it's simply to ask leader of the council to write to the government asking for a detailed schedule of funding to renew all play areas in Perth and Kinross, a schedule of dates for bringing forward the funding to allow the officers to plan the investment and ensure it is allocated accordingly. I don't think there's anything too contentious in asking for that information. Thank you.
Councillor Lane.
I need to ask Barbara if the Scottish Government will have the detailed schedule of, they'll have of the funding to renew all, but are you looking for specific which play parks are done in which order, or just when the funding will come through in which years and which tranches? Because I thought that was available already and was public knowledge, because I'm sure that we already know that. So maybe some of the officers can either shoot me down for being wrong and misunderstanding it, but I thought that knowledge was, we knew when the funding was expected to come through.
Andy Clegg is here and he's able
Yes.
to answer that question.
Good. Andy.
Okay, can you hear me? Thanks, convener. Yes,
Yes.
We do have a schedule of the payment amounts that the Scottish Government are going to fund us over the term of the government term. So yes, we have all that detail. What we're working out at the moment is which play areas we're prioritising within that money, and we're quite well progressed with that as well.
Okay, I also suspect I'm not sure if it's a matter that's come up at Environment and Economic Development Committee, but I'm certainly aware that there is a clear schedule. It's over the lifetime of this Parliament, and my understanding was the Scottish Government had indicated a figure of 60 million, but that was for all councils across Scotland, and it wasn't to finance each and every play park.
If you got Barbara.
Barbara Renton.
Okay, I was just going to post this information in the meeting chat, but it's just to say that in 2021-22 we received 140,000. This year it's 144,000. Next year it's 291,000. 25-26 it's 437,000, and in 26-27 it is 728,000. I'll put that information in the chat for elected members.
So does that satisfy you that we have the schedule of what further would you be looking for me to write for?
Well, I think what the convener just said is incorrect, because the SNP's manifesto commitment says we will deliver a programme, sorry, reading the wrong one, we will renew every play park. We will renew every play park in Scotland, so that includes Perth and Kinross. So maybe the question might be, is the money that we know we're going to get from the Scottish Government enough to renew every play park in Perth and Kinross? I suspect the answer to that is no, but Andy Clegg is the expert.
But that is, we're debating your amendment at the moment. We're not going on off-piece to something that's not on a paper here.
My point is, or my
if we're discussing the amendment, because we've gone past debating the paper, we're now talking about the amendment, and in my view, and is that the question's been answered that your amendment's asking me to write for, but I'm quite happy to write again.
Well, if you're happy to write again, I think that would be absolutely fine. Then at least we'll have it public record, and you'll have a response to the letter, and we'll know exactly what we're dealing with, and we can talk about the implications of what that does for our play parks at a future meeting. So grateful for you offering to do that. Thanks.
If the council, I think we will put it to a vote, because I think that I'm not going to accept that, and when I've already given you the information.
Okay, that's fine, thanks.
And if we take the tranches that have been set out, it comes to a figure of in total 1.74 million. And
Convener, I'll withdraw the amendment for the moment and we'll think about it for a future meeting. Thanks.
Okay, so the amendment has been withdrawn.
Thanks, Convener. And reflecting on yours and the Vice Convener slash leader's comments, I do just want to thank the administration and thank officers in particular for pulling together that Appendix 4 in response to the proposal I put forward. I think it's very helpful to have that overview of the significant projects and their current status, and to be able to follow up on that and to question about it. On a separate matter though, following up on the question I asked about the Perth and Kinross Lighting Action Plan, I note that we as elected members, we don't know and haven't had for some while an update on the phasing of that, but there is money to be spent in this financial year. Now, forgive me because I think I need to adjust the lenses or get a new prescription, but most of the money, only a fraction of the money was spent up to 31st of December 2022, but most of the money was spent, most of the money is, or the whole amount of £1,075,000 is projected to be spent in this financial year. So there must be commitments being made of 550, 600 odd thousand in the 3 months between December and between the end of December and the end of March. So I wonder whether yourself, Convener and Vice Convener, would be willing to accept a suggested add-on to the recommendations in the report, which is to instruct officers to pause making any further commitments that we could then consider in the budget, which is the capital budget, which is only 4 weeks today, not to include anything which was previously committed, such as commitments that have to be made in relation to Perth High School or the other major capital projects.
Councillor Lang.
I would be happy to accept that because I don't think that we should fetter all the budget BRGs any further than they already are, and things have moved on a lot since some of these decisions were taken last year, and so I think I'd be quite happy to put a pause on these, and they can be reinstated if budget review groups want them or not, but only for where commitment or financial commitment has already not been made.
Yes, and I think that's important that the commitment has not been made.
Thanks very much.
Right, do we have any further comments? Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, Convener, I'm sure I heard at the start of this report you saying that there was an absolute commitment on behalf of the administration to the capital programme. We then have a, I think, extremely opaque question and request from Councillor Stewart regarding the capital programme, and you're giving him an assurance that actually it's all up for grabs again. Now, you've either got a strong commitment to it or you haven't.
We are in the middle of the budget process. It is a period of 4 weeks, and then I think we can determine in a month's time on the 1st of March. Okay. And basically, and if you take what is in Appendix 4, you can see what we're trying to do with the capital budget to be on top of projects going forward, which I would put, we've never been quite as much, we've done not quite as much on that front in the past, and we want to be able to assess project by project going forward. And I think the request is reasonable, and it's not going to, you know, we're not talking an immensely lengthy period of time. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, convener, in the last council term, the leader of the council never ever tired of berating the administration on its ambition or perceived lack of ambition with regard to its capital programme. But there was never a moment in time where the Finance and Resources Committee agreed to pause the entirety of the capital programme.
Doing that.
We're not pausing the entirety of the capital programme. We're pausing some elements of it that have not been started at this time, and I do not think would fit into any of our priorities possibly at this time. But we can, we'll all put forward our priorities in the 1st of March, and I think it would be remiss to make a commitment that then we wanted to pull out of because we do not think it fits in the corporate plan. And some of the things that were highlighted there by Councillor Stewart may fall into that.
Bailey.
I wonder, perhaps for the avoidance of doubt, could we maybe have the text of this additional recommendation so that we can all be clear about it? Because I share some of Councillor Barrett's concerns, but I do perhaps understand what Councillor Stewart's looking to achieve. But it may be easier if we just had the text of whatever additional recommendation is being approved, just written into the chat or similar, please.
Councillor Stewart.
I'm happy to type something up, yes.
It would be helpful to have in advance. I think we'll, yes, recess.
So we'll reconvene at 25.
Yeah. Right, let's reconvene, and I'm going to ask our Chief Executive, Thomas Glenn, to make a comment.
Thank you, Convener. Following discussions with Councillor Stewart, I was just seeking to offer some reassurance that officers were not intent on entering into new contracts in the period before the budget papers on the 1st of March. We will continue to respond to and invest monies where there's already a contractual committed decision, but no new decisions between now and the 1st of March is what we'd commit to do.
Thanks for that clarification, Chief Executive. I'm happy to withdraw my suggestion and move the business of the meeting along.
All right, sorry. I think I've got here Billy. Yes?
My comment was just the procedural matter about requesting that we could see the text of the amendment that's now withdrawn so we can move on. Thank you, though.
Right, yes, because there is no amendment. Bailey Ahern.
I've just withdrawn that because mine was based on the similar comment.
Are there any further comments to be made? Okay, that so being, can I ask members of the committee to, the report has been moved, it has been seconded. Can I ask members of the committee to agree the report? We agreed? Good. Right. We now move on to item 7, where I used to ask quite a number of questions, but is the Treasury paper. And once again, can I ask Stuart Mackenzie to present this?
Thank you, Convener and Halcyon Days. This report advises the Committee of Treasury activity undertaken during the quarter to the 31st of December 2022. There were increases in the bank base rate in November and December in response to rising inflation. The base rate is currently 3.5%, and whilst headline inflation fell marginally in both November and December to 10.5%, there is market expectation of a further increase in bank base rates when the Monetary Policy Committee's report is issued tomorrow. As shown in Appendix 1 to the report, Public Works Loans Board rates remained volatile over the quarter, with rates for long-term borrowing increasing. Treasury activity during the quarter is summarised in Section 5 and Appendix 2 to the report. There was no new long-term borrowing undertaken during the quarter, with the Council's total long-term debt remaining at £606.3 million, as at the end of December. Temporary borrowing was undertaken for cash flow purposes, but no temporary loans remained outstanding at the end of the quarter. Investment activity was lower than during the previous quarter, as there was fewer surplus funds to invest due to cash flow requirements. However, investment returns increased in line with movements in the bank base rate, with investments undertaken during the quarter generating £456,000 on maturity, and the total level of investments outstanding reduced from £240.5 million to £207.7 million at the end of December. Now, the conveners asked me just to elaborate on that a little bit. So we have investments which mature when we reinvest them, and our total level of cash balances held as temporary investments reduces over time as we progress with the capital programme and depending on our level of borrowing. So if I can take members to paragraph 5.6 on page 77 of the agenda pack. The reason that there's been a reduction in investment income is simply that we had £84 million of fixed investments in the last quarter, and £25 million in this quarter. So it's rare that I, over the last few months, have been able to give any committee any good news. But it's good news that we had over £2 million from the last quarter's investments. It's good news that we'll have over £400,000 of investment income from the December quarter's investments. And it's good news that our investment return is increasing. So that's 3 pieces of good news I've been able to convey within the one sentence, and I'm going to stop there. And finally, the last piece of good news, there were no breaches in compliance with Treasury and investment policy, and all prudential indicators remained within approved limits. Happy to take questions, Convener.
Thank you, Stuart. Are there any questions? And I see Councillor Park as one. Councillor Park.
Thank you very much, Convener. I'm at paragraph 5.2 on the subject of the short-term temporary loans. I'm assuming, but it doesn't actually say it, that the interest rates quoted there are annual ones and not for the periods involved. But can I ask, were these short-term temporary loans for specific arisings, or were they for, I don't know, short-term cash flow issues? Thank you.
Stuart.
Thank you, Councillor Park. The interest rates are annualised, but what we pay is based on the figures you're seeing, and they're for cash flow management purposes only. It's just the ins and outs of money.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. You know that I struggle a little bit with some of these huge amounts of money. Drawn immediately to 5.7, it says the daily average amount of such funds over the quarter increased from 3 million in the last quarter to 7.2. What was the reason for that? I suspect you're going to tell me it's somewhere else in the report that I've missed.
Stuart.
Try and give a fairly direct answer if I can, Councillor Forbes. It's simply that our approach to invest, because we had less money to invest and we have cash flow requirements over the quarter, including the early payment of salaries in December. The money is being invested short term rather than longer term. So that's where the figure increased.
Next is Councillor Braun, followed by Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Convener. And I too have a problem with some of these figures, but and tell me, Mr. Mackenzie, if I got this wrong, but I understand that from past days that we borrowed a considerable amount of money when interest rates were very low. Base rate was 0.5% and we were borrowing money low. Am I right in saying that money's now been laid off onto the money markets because interest rates have gone higher, so we're getting more money than what we're paying and getting the benefit of that interest turn? And is that money coming back into the capital fund as a benefit? Have I got that the right way round? Right way round.
Sure.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Councillor Bond. So we borrowed money some time ago now at very low interest rates, specifically to deliver the capital programme. There's a timing difference between the borrowing of the money because we borrowed in advance of need, as we can under the Treasury policy and in line with regulation. We invest that money until we need it to draw it down from the capital programme. We generate income in that. That money then finds its way into the revenue monitoring report as interest and revenue balances, and there's an adjustment in the revenue monitoring report which transfers some of that back to the capital fund. It's fairly straightforward. Thank you.
So at the moment we are earning more interest than we're paying. That was the point?
Apologies, yes. On the money that you're referring to, yes. It'd actually be quite difficult not to earn more interest when we're paying back on I think it was an average of 1.5% that the interest on that particular loan was.
Thanks, Convener. That's why I'm not on this committee, you see. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lane.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. It was just raised at the last meeting of this around hoping that our finance team would maybe enter into some sort of dialogue with the UKIB, the UK Investment Bank, which loans to local authorities under PWLB board rates, and obviously the SNIB Bank, the Scottish National Investment Bank, only lends to private investors and individuals and not the local authorities. So I was just wondering for information for the rest of the committee, to let them know that there has been some initial discussion, and we will be exploring the favourable rates maybe that the UK Bank would have, and also the possibility that their integration with various other investors when we're trying to move forward projects like Perth West and the Eco Innovation Park. So it's just, have we initiated discussions?
Stuart.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Lynn, for your question. And yes, happy to confirm. We're trying to get some dates in the diary, and we've got a range of dates from the UK Investment Bank, and they seem remarkably pleased to hear from us. So that's all good news.
Any further? There's one further question again from Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. It was just on Appendix 3, which is a list of counterparties. Some of the banks have a limit, and many don't. And I just wondered why there's a difference. It's a general interest.
Stuart, we haven't had a question on credit ratings and such like for a while, but
thank you, Convener. I'm hoping that wasn't quite what Councillor Braun was asking. I think, though, that the general question was, we've got a list of banks, we don't invest in them all. These are all highly rated banks, deemed very secure by the market, and it's really just to keep our options open. If there's an opportunity to invest, if there's any particularly attractive offer on the market that we could take advantage of.
Councillor Braun? Right. I don't see any further questions. And we will see more tomorrow with the MPC, and we probably do indeed have will see further increases in interest rates. And I think you've seen the indications on economic growth from the IMF and others recently. I just want to add two more comments. I think our proactive approach to Treasury management, and it's not just Stuart, but also with the team and John Jennings, I think is further reinforced within the report. We set out investment income over the last quarter of just over about 456,000, and we anticipate the investment income for the full year could be of the order of 4.7 million. And I think Stuart Mackenzie, at my request, went in a little bit of detail there. Also, once again, there were no breaches in compliance with the investment strategy and policies, and the Council's prudential indicators were indeed adhered to throughout the quarter. So I'm happy to move the report. Can I ask for a seconder?
Thanks. I'll be brief. I'm very happy to second report. I've not thanked officers. I've waited to this time to homologate it all into the last three papers and thank them for the work that they've done to help us in a technical area where I'm sure I certainly need as much guidance as I can possibly get. So I'd like to thank the officers and for their help over the last three papers as well. So thanks. Happy to second.
Okay, can we agree the report? And I too would like to thank the finance team, and not just on the Treasury paper, but on the revenue and capital monitoring paper. And we know they're extremely hard work just now with the whole budget review process. And we've got another 4 weeks, almost exactly, of it. The next paper is on the framework for managing workforce change. For this paper, that is going to be chaired by Councillor Lane as Vice Convener, and then I will return to chair the session both on the digital strategy and also on the Community Investment Fund. But Councillor Lee.
Okay, thanks, convener. So we move on to paper 8, the framework for managing workforce change. It's a very important paper, and I would like to hand over to Pauline Johnson to introduce this report to us. Thanks, Pauline.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Convener. This report is submitted to consider proposed amendments to the provisions within the current framework for managing workforce changes. The Council's practice is to review employment policies regularly to ensure they remain fit for purpose. In reviewing the framework, the intention was to ensure that its provisions were affordable and support improved flexibility, adaptability and movement of staff across the Council to facilitate change and transformation. The framework is designed to and continues to ensure that as a Council, we provide a fair and consistent approach for our workforce. In the current economic climate and the budgetary challenges faced by the Council, the existing provisions are no longer affordable. Following careful consideration of all aspects of the framework and feedback from our trade unions, this report is seeking approval of refreshed provisions relating to the voluntary redundancy compensation and the search periods for suitable alternative employment. The provisions revert to the pre-2016 arrangements for redundancy payment calculation and retains the existing calculation of applying the actual rate of pay. In addition, anyone who wishes to volunteer in any affected area by change will continue to receive either unreduced access to their pension or a cash flat top-up of £6,000 prorated to their redundancy payment if they volunteer. The search for suitable alternative employment will remain at a minimum of 8 weeks, with the maximum period now the individual's contractual notice period, that is up to 3 months. The Council remains committed to continue to provide support and learning opportunities for all employees leading or affected by change and transformation, and we will work with those who may be affected to optimise opportunities as far as reasonably practical to remain in the work. I'm happy to take any questions on the paper.
Do we have any questions? I don't have any coming through here yet. It's maybe slow. It's maybe I'm not as quick as Councillor Donaldson. So, yep, Bailey Chris Ahern, yes.
Thank you very much. I just want some clarity on a couple of times where the trade unions have been mentioned here in terms of the consultation. Paragraph 6.1 says there have been a number of meetings with trade unions to consult them on the proposed changes to the revisions of the framework, and their feedback and suggestions have been carefully considered and reflected in the final draft. The following sentence says, in principle, they advise they cannot agree to the changes proposed as their role is to optimise and maintain employment. And then on page 107 in the 3.3, consultation with trade unions will be with a view to reaching agreement. So there seems to be 3 different positions there. I just wonder what is exactly the position with the trade unions, and are they still against what's been put forward in the framework?
I'll hand to Pauline to give you some clarity.
Thank you. We had several meetings with the trade unions, and as a principle, they would be unable to actually agree to redundancy arrangements, which is the same position that the unions took in 2010 when this framework was introduced. But what we did do is we discussed all of the terms and provisions, and they made suggestions for improvements on the discussions that we had, and I have incorporated them into the framework as described. Therefore, the information that's contained in terms of the refreshed provisions have to, insofar as I can get agreement from the trade unions to accept, they have accepted the points that I have made. I did have several meetings with them. All of the terms were put to them in writing, and I get feedback from them in writing, but as a matter of principle, they could not agree. So I've not got an explicit agreement from the trade unions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on this paper? If we have no questions on the report, no further questions, I will move the report. When I can find my notes. Thank you. I don't think anybody really wants to be in this position, and I'd like to thank all the leaders who came to meetings before we decided to take this action and raised questions at that time, and it was very helpful that we all were able to share our concerns and discuss it with Pauline before we, as a group, that attended these meetings, asked Pauline to go and negotiate with the unions, and we gave her the mandate to do that. So with regret, really, that we're having to do this, to face this, I think it is good practice to keep employment policies under review and to ensure they remain fit for purpose and relevant to the prevailing circumstances. I recommend approval of the provisions set out in the refreshed framework for managing workforce changes. The scale of the financial challenges facing this council means that the refreshed provisions will enable the council to make workforce changes and undertake transformation and change reviews smoothly in a fair, consistent and equitable manner. These changes, along with the amended search period, are more affordable in the current financial climate. This council has a good track record of avoiding redundancies. This council will remain a large employer in the area, and officers will continue to work with staff and unions to optimise employment for existing employees. It is intended that by introducing these refreshed provisions, the council will protect people as far as reasonably practicable to remain in council employment. I move this report.
And I wish to second the report and proposals.
Thank you. And we have an amendment from Bailey.
Thank you, Convener. I find that I can't sit by while the provisions for those that we have to let go are eroded away in this way. We heard just now that the trade unions don't agree, and that's written into the paper as well. Voluntary redundancy scheme, this puts it pretty close to the statutory scheme, and I believe that it's more equitable for us to give people the choice to leave and some incentive to leave if we're in the uncomfortable position of having to reduce the size of our workforce at some point. Therefore, I move just quite simply an amendment that we do not accept the recommendations of the paper and we maintain the status quo. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. Do you have a seconder?
I don't have a seconder, but it would be a sad day if no one were to stand up for workers' rights alongside me. Thank you.
Ask again, do you have a seconder? Thank you, Bailey. If there are no other amendments and the report has been moved, we'll go to comments. Councillor McEwen.
I do share a lot of Bailey's concerns regarding the change in terms and conditions of employees. In my declarations of interest form, you see that I was previously a United Staffside rep in the NHS, and I do firmly believe in unions and the work that they do to improve the working standards of employees. However, I do feel that in this instance that the unions have engaged to the degree that they are able, have amended the proposals in a small way to keep the 8-week aspect to it. And I think that's how we need to go forward. And the statement where all employees being treated equally, which is in the papers, is a stance that I find acceptable.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Councillor Ling. I'm sure if Councillor Duff was here, he'd be able to be much more eloquent in making comment than I perhaps will be on this occasion. I have sympathy with Councillor Bailey's position as well, and we know across Perth and Kinross how well served we are by staff, from doing more lower level jobs right through to senior officers and whatever we decide this afternoon. I don't think that we diminishes in any way the way that we feel about our staff. It's very unfortunate that we're in this position. I would ask you, Councillor Lane, to continue lobbying as much as you can the Scottish Government budget day tomorrow to ensure that we get the fairest possible settlement possible so that we can keep our staffing levels as they are. Again, Pauline Johnston, I had the privilege of working with Pauline on the JNCT with the teachers unions, with Councillor Rebick over the last 5 years, and see the really good working relationship that Pauline and her team have with unions right across the council, and think that gives me a degree of confidence that whatever situations we find moving forward, we will work very, very hard to keep those relationships and do everything we can for staff right across the council. So it is not a position that any of us really want to be in, but it is the position we're in, and I would again appeal to you, Councillor Lane, to lobby as hard as you can to make sure that any funds that are possible to come to us do so. Thank you.
Thanks for those words, which I agree with, Councillor Shires, and as you know, I will lobby both governments and anybody else who's willing to help fund Perth and Kinross Council, and will continue to do so. I don't see any other comments coming in, so before I ask to agree the paper, I'd just like to thank Pauline Johnson for the difficult work that she's taken forward. I'd like to echo everybody who's commented already about this, and I would like to also draw attention to Bailey wishes his dissent to be recorded, and that we will do. And I think my view is this is the best way forward to retain as many of our workforce as we can. The pie is only so big, and we want to have everybody getting a fair share of it and keep as many people within the organisation as we can. And I believe that is be what everyone, including Councillor Bailey, obviously, within this chamber wishes to achieve by this. So thanks very much. So can we agree this paper? Hand back to the convener.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Right. Okay, we move on to the paper and digital strategy, and Bailey, as he had indicated earlier, declared an interest, and despite his experience and expertise in this area, he can contribute. I really am quite pleased to introduce this paper to the committee today. You may recall you were invited to a briefing session on the 15th of November last year. That discussion took place and formed the next draft of the digital strategy that was then circulated to you following the session. This report contains the final version of that digital strategy and a delivery plan containing the headline actions for progressing over the next 2 years. The report asks councillors to approve our refreshed, ambitious digital strategy for the periods 2023 up until 2027. We're also seeking to nominate Councillor Jack Welsh of Strathmore Ward as the council's digital champion. What I would say on the along with digital champion on the report itself, I think it does set out, there's certain aspects I'm not totally au fait with, I'll be perfectly honest. But I do think it sets out that this is not about technicians and IT speak. It is about how we connect, how we interact with our communities and with all of our citizens. And I think it gives a number of examples, just clear examples, how improvements and advances in digital infrastructure can be a benefit, huge benefit to our ordinary citizens. And the very first one was example using Bill and enabling him to be able to live independently. There's a whole variety of factors that, this is an area where we do have a good record. I think with the Scottish Local Government Digital Office, we came out, I think it's in 2021, third, fourth in the whole of Scotland. So we do have a good record on this front. I think also the scale of what we're looking to do is set out in the appendix over the next 2 years, and it's the stress on now, next, and later, but later is by the end of 2024. However, to speak to this paper, I've said enough. We've got, along with Alan Taylor, who's our head of IT, we also have here today Lynn Harris, who's the digital service manager, and David Adams, who's the IT service manager. So I think probably start with Alan. Could we hear from yourself?
Thank you very much, convener. That was a very comprehensive introduction. So I think all I would add at this juncture is, as you've indicated, our previous strategy, which was approved by Strategic Policy and Resources Committee back in November 2016, was very successful. That has been externally validated and has put us on a sound footing for the document that you've now got in front of you. Particularly with regards to our online services and our mobile working, which we spoke about at the elected members briefing session back on the 15th of November. We've now got more than 100,000 online transactions a year, and we have a star system for the online transactions for our citizens across Perth and Kinross, and we get an average of about 4.4 out of 5 from I think about 13,000 responses. So we've been very successful in this area to date. And obviously we want to be even more ambitious, and that's what the document that you've got in front of you, that paints a picture of how ambitious we actually want to be as a council moving forward. And Lynn, Dave and myself are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. And I see Billy Ahern has several questions, but nobody else has come in as yet on Council Forbes 2. I'll take Billy Ahern first of all.
Thank you very much, convener. And I'd just like to say to officers, an excellent report, an excellent ambition. Having been in a previous life an IT network manager, I understand the stresses of moving services online using central resources and cloud resources. I think it's fair to say that before 2021, the idea that we'd have major events that would test the IT resource of an organisation was probably something that was just written down in a plan. But now we rely more and more on IT, certainly by the changes that the actual pandemic brought for us. I just wonder about the council's contingency plan in terms of accessing central resources and cloud resources, especially from officers that are now working away from the building. We've got to look at things like cyber attacks, major internal infrastructure failure, national infrastructure failure, or a crisis restricting again our movement. How long does the council envisage a problem without access to these critical services? And how does that plan work around moving stuff onto online and cloud services?
Alan, you first, but I'm conscious here with one or two of these questions. It might be Lynn or David, are best to respond to some aspects, but clearly this is about disaster recovery and protection of our systems and entirely. Alan.
Yeah, we have a disaster recovery plan. We consult with all services about all our major business systems, and we have agreed timelines and prioritisation for bringing these systems back. Obviously, we wouldn't want to be in a situation where a cyber attack in any way has disabled any systems, but we do have discussions with services, and we have revised the plans and the timescales in that regard. I think probably my colleague Dave Adams might want to say a little bit more though.
Dave?
Yes, just following on from what Alan's saying, yeah, I mean in terms of timescale, what we can see from other organisations that are unfortunate enough to have a major incident, the services can be offline for a considerable time. So the business continuity plans that are in place and the services have, they are geared up to look at that and plan around what they can do over that period where services might not be available, etc.
Thanks. Billy Ahern, I'll come back to you with other questions in just a minute, but absolutely right, cyber security and how we get, recovery from, is really, really crucial, and it's something, I'm sure we'll keep on top of. Next is Councillor Forbes, followed by Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, Convener. I'm in the appendix at the moment, and I'm looking at the headline on the left. It's a section tackling the climate challenge, and I noticed the indicative start time for that is later rather than now or next. Now, I was wondering, given all of our commitments to tackling the climate change, is it appropriate that that's in the later column, or could it be brought forward so it's done sooner?
I will let Lynn Harris answer. Sorry, Convener, I will let Lynn Harris answer in terms of the detail, but what I would say is that action plan, Councillor Forbes, is only for 2023 and 2024. So obviously in terms of the timeline, when it says later, it is talking about 2024, but Lynn Harris might have some detail about why we've got it aligned to that period.
Thank you, Convener. I think it's safe to say that this is an evolving programme, and there's work that happens consistently across the organisation, and climate action is one of the growing areas. We are involved in consultation with the Climate Action Group across the organisation, and we are building information intelligence up to support officers over in planning. And I think it's just that there are certain things that we have to get in place first to make sure that we don't have to undo work. And again, we support the services with information and intelligence. And we are looking at areas such as sustainable procurement, as well as some of the work that we're doing in preventative areas of the organisation round about IoT. So some of that work is actually scheduled for now, and some of it's scheduled for later on in the year. I hope that answers your question.
Councillor Forbes? You happy? Right. Councillor McEwen wants to withdraw his question, so I'm now going to turn to Councillor Braun, and then I know there's more questions from Billy Ahern.
Thank you, Convener. I'm turning to the example you quoted, that's Bill in the appendix. I'm sure many will say that smacks of Big Brother, but it sounds to me like a marvellous step forward, monitoring people like this. So my question was, how far along are we on a rollout on this? Because I would have thought residential homes, care homes, this is the ideal thing for people living in those sort of places. So how far along the line are we in rolling out this concept?
I'll just answer that one. Well, we're certainly not at the start. We're actually quite mature in our thinking around about the digital services that we're trying to design around about this area. And we have already begun some projects looking at IoT, and some of our colleagues across in Health and Social Care Partnership and our technology enabled care services are already quite mature in their thinking. What we're trying to do here is take it that step forward, and that's about our level of ambition with this digital strategy, is to take things from being reactive to proactive to prevention. And I guess these personas that we've tried to identify here is to give the council, set our level of ambition about where we're trying to get to. So we start small, we make sure that we do appropriate checks at time to check for things like data protection, information compliance, information security, and obviously GDPR. And then we build on from that. Working across with NHS Tayside as well, so some of the services are provided by our colleagues in NHS Tayside. So again, the relationships are quite strong there, and we work together to make sure that we're not having to unpick anything, and we're moving forward step by step. So to answer your question, Councillor, we aren't anywhere near finished this, but we're definitely on the path towards delivering more preventative services for people like Bill in the community.
Thanks, Convener.
Councillor Braun. Billy Ahern, and I think you've got another 2, maybe 3 questions, but far away, because I think this is such an important area.
It is, and it's obviously an area, having my previous jobs, I've got a huge interest in, as the team probably know. Second question is based on the fact that we're moving a lot of our services online, and access for the public coming into council buildings to access that. Because obviously they don't have the means at home to access the services. Do we have sufficient access points across the council buildings, especially for outlying offices, or are we going to need to invest in more?
I think I'm going to ask Alan on this.
Yeah.
It's about digital inclusion as well.
Yeah. Well, in terms of digital inclusion, we have done a lot of work as the Digital Participation Working Group, which I think I mentioned at the briefing session previously. And one of the areas the Digital Inclusion Working Group was looking at was a Digital Inclusion Fund. So that fund was providing access for those that were excluded through digital connectivity, things like Wi-Fi in village halls, etc., where bids had been made. So in terms of the issues that have been raised through that group, that the issue that you have just raised just now is not an issue that has been flagged at all. I would also say that through the customer service centre, where we provide assisted self-serve, and we set up appointments, as you're aware, in Poorhouse and 2 High Street in the past, there is no issue being raised in the feedback there with regards to more availability of council service points, because obviously there is a wide variety of areas where people can go, including libraries, etc., to access our services. We have done research in the past. We asked people who were phoning the service centre why they were phoning the service centre rather than self-serving, but for many people it was through a choice, rather than not having access to either broadband or a device that would enable them to do that. But we still experience, although, as I said, we've got 100,000 transactions in the last year that are self-serve transactions. We do have 50,000 transactions that are self-serve through the service centre. So there are a range of people that still want us to assist them with access to the digital services, but the issue of a lack of points for people coming in to do that themselves, it's not something that's been flagged at all.
Thanks, Alan. Billy Ahern.
That's good to hear, and the fact that our digital inclusion service is working and we haven't had anybody complaining, so that's good. My third question is more like an ask, and that's for when we have meetings in this chamber. We have issues with everybody, take your mic off, take it on, and I think it's particularly noticeable, certainly in the full council meeting, when we have a vote and committee services are required to keep asking members what their vote is and have to switch it on, switch it off. Is there possible to add another master microphone, as the convener has, that can override it? Therefore, he hasn't got to keep passing it along the desk. So at least there's more than one where somebody, one of the officers, can override everything else that's in the chamber.
Alan, and as you may notice, I don't always remember to switch on and off
I am happy to check that out unless Dave Adams wants to comment just now and get back to you.
That was all I was going to say, Alan, is that, yeah, we would have to go and get that checked out and come back on that point.
Thank you. It might make meetings go along a bit smoother. And my last question is for yourself, convener. It's just on something you said about digital champions. I was under the impression that each group was having a digital champion, but you've just mentioned one. Maybe it's for the leader to say. I just want clarity on the position, because I was asked earlier this week if I would do that for our group, and just wanted clarity.
I'll ask the leader.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's been a bit confusion between officers because we were asked to nominate a digital champion for this paper, and I believed that Jack Welsh from our group was ideally suited, and as he's giving up work commitments to concentrate more on this, and I thought that he would be a good one. But then I did see, and a question I've not had an answer back, that there was it went out to an ask to all groups. So I think there was, it went out asking all groups to nominate. An email came in. I can't remember who it was, Bailey Hearn, but happy to look into that and get to the bottom, because I have raised it myself, but I've not had an answer yet. So but I'm sure that if there is only one and it's Jack Welsh, I'm sure he'll work very closely with you, and I'll direct him to you. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted clarity. I was a bit confused there, but I'm thinking, all right.
Could I possibly clarify further, if that's okay, convener?
Okay.
Yeah. So it is a bit unfortunate timing. I understand the confusion, Councillor Hearn, because the term digital champion is perhaps slightly overused. It's a bit like super user in the past when it came to systems. But what has happened here is that with regards to each group and the training that you receive from the digital skills team, they have used the terminology digital champion for an elected member from each group to talk to their group and to feed back to the digital skills team how they want the training to be targeted. And I know there's a programme for the next year that the digital skills team have certainly shared with committee services, if not with all elected members. So that is the role of that digital champion from each group. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. As I say, it's terminology that's overused. Some of you may recall the Digital Participation Working Group SCVO training that took place for about 50 people across Perth and Kinross. Those individuals are also digital champions out in communities doing something similar to what I've just described in terms of what the digital skills team are asking elected members for. The role that we have asked for in the paper is something that I believe was also recommended by Audit Scotland when they did their external evaluation of 6 councils that's mentioned in the paper, and it's good practice. And that is a role for an elected member from the council that would have a lead role advocating this strategy and vision. They would provide feedback and representation in terms of what we're proposing to do and how service users see what we are doing as a council in terms of our digital programme. They might act as a sounding board actually for officers as we're implementing other online services or anything else, and they would offer scrutiny and challenge on the proposals and the actions that we're taking forward on a regular basis. And as the Vice Convener said, clearly the digital champions from the other groups would be able to feed in to that council digital champion. So in this paper, we are looking for a digital champion from the council that is beyond the individual elected members in the groups.
So did you understand that? Yes, clearly. I certainly wouldn't be a digital champion anywhere. So I hope that clears that up. So today we're nominating Jack Welsh as our digital champion, but obviously there'll be a group of 5 other digital champions, and the Labour group may have a split vote. So
okay, any further questions? No? Right. What I'm going to do is to move this paper I made some comments earlier. I'm glad that the question of cybersecurity has come up, but clearly, you know, the nature of the animal is, you know, we can't always reveal, you know, just what measures we take on that front. Otherwise, you'd diminish your security. Very glad the question of digital inclusion has come up, and how those citizens who don't have great access to information technology and digital connections are not left behind. But equally, we as a council, we cannot be left behind. I think it's crucial, and I think this paper and the appendices set out clearly what the scope of ambition is. If you look at Appendix 2, and I hear what was said, you know, as regards, you know, on climate change and how we align our digital infrastructure with a lot of our policies. But, you know, if you take just on digital classrooms, one-to-one devices, there's a whole range, a whole mass of activities, migration of business systems to the cloud, and very clearly, you know, it's just we're seeing the growth of cloud computing, and whatever else happens in the economy, it's a trend I'm sure is going to continue. But very much, I'd like to thank Alan, Lynn, and David, and you know, on the question of a digital champion, I think nonetheless going forward we want to involve other councillors that have expertise in this area, and how we shape and design our programmes systems going forward. This is a priority for Perth and Kinross Council. It provides a clear ambition for our staff and all of our communities within Perth and Kinross. I really am pleased with the progress we've seen to date since the adoption, the approval of the previous digital strategy in November 2016. This strategy will carry us all up to 2027. I'm sure there will be, because just the nature of changing technologies, there will be changes to come over the next year, 2 years. But I think we are in a good position, and this matters so much for the rest of what we want to do to achieve and bring about as a council. And I'm also pleased to recommend Jack Welsh to be our lead digital champion, but it most assuredly does not exclude other councillors for having a strong involvement. So I move the paper. Okay.
Happy to formally second.
And with Bailey Ahern following, then Councillor Parrott. So Councillor.
Thanks, Convener. I think I just want to say that we shouldn't lose sight of the work that the IT team did for us as we went into COVID. I think we're way ahead of other local authorities in getting the democratic process up and running again virtually, and I'm sure we would all want to thank the people behind the scenes who worked away. They're largely unseen and largely unthanked. So I'm sure on behalf of all of us, we can thank them for that. Have to just go back to my question. I was slightly disappointed to see that tackling the climate challenge wasn't programmed for slightly sooner than it is, but reassured that we're still only talking at most 2 years away from that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And I would just point out on the now, next and later, and later just simply indicates work is planned to begin before end of December 2024, but it may well conceivably happen sooner, quite a bit sooner than that. But I think they've got an immense workload though to get through, and it's important we do align things and we do it right. Bailey Ahern and then Councillor Parrott.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to thank the IT teams for all the work they've done. As Councillor Fall said, you know, IT always get the blame for a lot of things, and the help desk, having been there, gets the frustration from users. I think it's an ambitious plan for the next 4 years. I think it's one that we have to put forward. But as all of us that work in IT know, as soon as you put something down on paper, it's out of date, especially when we're relying on Microsoft, who change it every 5 minutes. And I'm sure in 4 years' time, what we've got on our desktops at the moment will be completely different. And I've also spoken to some members in the team as well about the advancements in AI and how we can possibly use that within the council. So that'll be very, very interesting. So I look forward, hopefully, 2027, are we still here? Whatever it is, that, yeah, having the next strategy and seeing exactly then what we're going to be using for both the council and for our residents. So thank you very much, and thank you very much to the team.
Councillor Parrott.
Thank you very much, Convener. I hope that in a resource-constrained environment that we take cybersecurity very seriously, and that we really do look at the matters of business continuity at the strategic level, document security where appropriate, and what I'd call reversionary mode for specific processes at the operational and tactical level. In a resource-constrained environment, it would be easy to see easy savings in the cybersecurity area, and I would ask everybody to resist that as strongly as they possibly can as we put greater reliance on digital means. And as a final comment, if I may, I'm delighted that Councillor Welsh has been chosen as the digital champion. Thank you.
Any further comments? And well, perhaps Councillor Parrott and myself wouldn't be deemed to be maybe leading edge on technology, although we have our moments perhaps. Anyone else? Right. I'm just going to conclude by saying I actually did listen. I've listened to 1 or 2 presentations with the Securities Institute, my previous role, and financial services. One thing we've not mentioned today, because I don't think people really know what it stands for, is the word metaverse, and nobody has raised that. I am very grateful to Alan, to Lynn, and to David, and I'm sure there's more to look at. Right, can we agree this paper and approve Councillor Welsh as our digital champion? Okay, we move on to our final paper of the day, and that is on the Community Investment Fund, and I'm going to ask Fiona Robertson to introduce the paper.
Thank you, Convener. Councillors, this report sets out the funding decisions that have been taken by local ward panels for the final round of the Community Investment Fund in 2022-23. Section 4 of the report tells you about the applications received and the breadth and spread of different kinds of projects that came forward for consideration. And Section 5 summarises the funding decisions that were reached in each ward. So we're asking you, first of all, to note those decisions, and secondly, to approve the carry forward of around about £68,000 of underspend from this year into next year, with a specific recommendation from officers that that money is dispersed in 2023-24 in the wards where there's been underspend this year. There are 4 of those, so that's Perth City, Strathallan, Strathmore and Cardiff Gowrie. Myself and Lee Haxton, who has worked on the CIF throughout its life, are happy to take any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions? I thought I saw Lee Haxton earlier, but right, any questions? Councillor Forbes, followed by Councillor Cuthbert. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. I just wondered for the officers if looking at this in the round, now that we're at this stage, is there anything you would look back on it and recommend that we should do differently?
I think there's throughout the lifetime of the Community Investment Fund, Councillor Forbes, we've tried to make improvement recommendations as and when they've come up, and as we've learned from the experience of managing and dispersing the fund. Committee may remember that we've looked at different options for dispersing the fund over the lifetime of it. We've also tried to improve make the process as streamlined and user-friendly as possible for grant applicants, and also made recommendations to you about devolving decisions to local grant panels. And I think in the view of officers, bearing in mind this council's commitment to devolve decisions to grassroots wherever possible, that was the right thing to do.
I don't know if Lee Haxton, if you want to come in on this as well.
Thank you, Convener. I think Fiona's covered it all. The only other comment I would make, I suppose, is on reflection, the process that we had for this year was more manageable and a better customer experience for applicants than it was in the first year. So that's a positive.
Okay, I see Councillor Forbes wants to make a comment. We'll deal with that in a minute. Can I ask a question from Councillor Cuthbert?
Yes, thank you, Convener. One of the things that always concerns me with when you're giving out grants of this sort is you can have 20 applicants for 100,000 and you've only got 50,000 to give out. I'd like some sort of reassurance or even a report that would tell us how the other applicants, what happened to them, were they able to find funding, could we find them additional funding? Because very often you've got applications that you'd love to give money to, you just don't have enough in the pot. So it's a question of how we've dealt with the surplus, if you like.
And I think also clearly there often can be applicants who actually are better going to other grant funding bodies, and where they might even actually get more and are more attuned to what they're about. But can I ask either Fiona or Lee on that one?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Cuthbert. I think the convener's part answered it. In a number of cases, we will signpost applicants to other funding sources that might be more appropriate, either within the council or indeed elsewhere. The criteria for the fund, as you know, in this current round have been tightened to focus on mitigating cost of living and make sure that we're directing the money at the projects and the community organisations that perhaps haven't benefited from the fund in the past. There's always going to be a finite pot of money, unfortunately, and it's never going to be possible to fund every project or initiative that comes forward. But the job of officers is to try and make sure that the grant panels get the best possible advice so they can make decisions that target the money where it's best used and most needed.
Councillor Cuthbert, you fine? Okay, I don't see any further questions. The three people do want to comment, but I'm going to move the report. Basically, this report, it summarises the overall spend for 2022-23 of the Community Investment Fund, and that's been the fourth year of the CIF. We've seen over that period some 2 million of council funds have been invested in around 400 projects across Perth and Kinross. Projects that in so many cases have made a real difference to grassroots issues, tackling inequality and support for new community initiatives focused on children and young people, health and well-being, and supporting local social enterprise. And we've seen a tightening up of the criteria, and that is necessary, and also, you know, with our new overall corporate plan. This is the final round of the CIF in its current form, but I think we should stress our commitment to empowering our communities through grassroots support is long term, and one which I think is shared across the council chamber. What will happen in 23-24? Obviously, we have the budget process just now. We also have, I certainly know, it's going to be the whole question of community empowerment, community engagement is going to be part of the council's transformation programme, and indeed on transformation, I hope Claire Mail is still here. There's going to be a briefing on transformation in the fairly near future. Finally, we're asked to note the funding decisions that have been made, and as you can see, there's 4 of the areas where there's still a required carry forward of funds for investment in the next financial year, and we need to approve that as well, and that carry forward. So I'm happy to move the paper, and I ask for a seconder.
Happy to second. Just to comment on Mr. Councillor Cuthbert's comment about having to make hard decisions where funding options and monies to go. You're doing that all the time within this chamber as well. All of us are. So, but happy to second.
Okay, thanks. Right, move on to comment. We're near the end of the day, but I'm sure there's about 4 or 5 people here. Councillor Forbes, followed by Councillor Braun.
Thanks. I'll keep this short. I think this has been a remarkable initiative. Really has been putting power into the hands of people. I'm a big fan of devolving power as far down as we possibly can. It's helped an awful lot of organisations in my ward and indeed in all of our wards, and delighted to see this coming back. I'm delighted to see a small amount of money left for the Carsagowrie ward. So thanks to the officers who have helped us through the process. Just one thing I'd like to say, the issue that I found is getting people to sit on ward panels, and whilst that's always been hard, we should make sure that we work even harder to get them, and maybe just suggest to the officers if they can think of any ways that we can get a pool of people together to make sure we have the required number of people to sit on the panel when we need them. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Braun, followed by Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. The Community Investment Fund has proved itself to be a complete success ever since it was introduced by the last administration in 2018. The figures in this paper show how successful. Apart from 2 wards, all were oversubscribed, and this has been the case in my ward for every round that we've had. The principle is sound, local groups applying for funds with decisions being made by local people. That's community empowerment at its best. And I know from my own panel that everyone involved, and different people each time, found the experience worthwhile. Every application is worthy, and those groups that have been successful have been able to expand their work one way or another to the benefit of their communities. We know that this year's budget will be complicated and difficult, but should the opportunity arise, I would hope that the present administration will see the popularity of this fund and go on to support it in some way for the benefit of our communities. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Now Councillor Barrett, followed by Councillor Rebick.
Thanks, Convener. I've found my experience of convening the previous but one ward panel and taking part in the last ward panel to be hugely rewarding experience. I think that the contacts that we make with the movers and shakers in our communities, the people that are involved on the ground in tackling severe and persistent inequalities in our community is beneficial, both in the short term that the applications make a difference in our communities, but also longer term. And I think one of the benefits that we've found in Perth City Centre is that recruiting previously successful applicants to be part of the panel in the future has delivered a really high quality and informed ward panel to make the sorts of decisions which focus on the local outcome improvement plan priorities and tackling those inequalities that I mentioned previously. Very effective. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I move to Councillor Rebick, Councillor Parrott has a point of clarification.
Thank you very much, Convener. And my apologies if I've got this wrong. We're being asked to note the funding decisions. Is it not actually the case that we are formally ratifying and agreeing those funding decisions, which is slightly different from noting them? Thanks.
Now, my understanding is that we are noting those decisions, and those decisions have already been approved. We changed it. Could I just, Fiona,
Thanks, convener. Yes, following some improvement recommendations that we made last year, these decisions sat at a local grant panel level, so the decisions have been taken. We're asking the committee to note those decisions today and approve the carry forward of the underspend.
Thank you. I stand corrected. Thank you.
Okay. And that decision is different from the position that applied initially, where grant applicants had to wait quite a long period of time before the funds were applied. Could I now ask Councillor Rebick and followed by Councillor McEwen?
Thanks again, convener. I too want to back up what's been previously said about the worthiness of Community Investment Fund, and I want to commend Lee and his team who have evolved procedures fantastically, I believe, over the years. So it's appreciated, and I think it's particularly useful, it has to be said, when it's involved in tackling inequality and deprivation, which I think was the original idea of Community Investment Fund, and I don't think we need to forget that. I particularly like the fact that we don't second guess the decisions of the ward panels. I think that's really important, and I also think where it's possible we do signpost unsuccessful bids, which is equally important. One slightly parochial point I will make, I know we've had debates over the years about the per city funds, whether they should be done on a ward basis or whether they should be aggregated. And I think the fact that they have been aggregated has been successful to some degree when you look at the projects that we've awarded money to, which may not have received the money had the funds not been aggregated. I think that's really useful. However, there is a but to that. I think some of the communities of Perth City North have felt more remote to the process now. And I think, notwithstanding the decisions of budget review groups as to what shape or form Community Investment Fund may or may not take going forward, I think if it's similar, there is a middle ground there. I think it's possible to aggregate some of the 3 wards money for the very good reasons that we do that, but also to keep some of the money separate so that we still have individual ward decisions made, and that would be a request possibly as we go forward. But I do like Community Investment Fund. I think it has been really useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rebick. Councillor McEwen, followed by Councillor Stewart.
You know, the Scottish Government's idea of the community making decisions about how part of the council budget is spent is a very, very good idea. And I don't think there's any councillor here who will say they don't want their communities making decisions for them. I think the SIF fund in its first few years I thought was appalling about how it was set up and how it was governed, how that then progressed as the years went on, and it improved and improved and improved year on year. I still think there's improvement needed. One of the consequences of the SIF fund is that our local action partnerships have been starved of resources. These action partnerships have fed into the Deloitte, they've fed into their own action plans. These Perthshire ones challenges are for poverty, mental health, physical well-being, and with the community action plans for community public transport, activities for young people, eco projects, and active travels and paths. These directions, these agreements, the action partnerships have been lost. They've not been followed up. They've not been challenged. And we need to ensure that going forward, that both the SIF and the action partnerships can work together to meet the demands that our communities want to bring forward. And I know that the different panels and the different ways that the SIF fund and the action partnerships act within the Perth and Kinross area is completely different. We have the Kinross situation where they're done on a completely different pilot from the rest of us. But I'd like to ensure that going forward that councillors are not involved in the decision making of how this money is spent, because I think that still does happen, and that these are decisions made by our communities and as wide a spread of our communities as possible, not half a dozen people in the town hall when you've got a population of 10,000 in a town who are not involved. So I think there's things that we can do to improve it going forward, but it certainly has achieved a lot of good things in the years that it's been in place so far.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen, and I think our last person to make comment will be Councillor Stewart. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. I've obviously been closely involved in the development of the Community Investment Fund, not only within Ward 2, but the fund generally since it started, as I spent some time with Ms Robertson discussing the setup of the fund in the first place. I'm very pleased to see that we've made such progress in terms of simplifying the process. I'm glad that we've got to a point now where instead of decisions needing to come for ratification to this committee, that actually where we have a ward panel set up, we trust them to make the decision, and then the money can be dispersed immediately. I'm pleased to see the widening of the criteria or the extra criteria that was added on this year to allow community groups to apply in for help with energy bills, given the vastly increasing gas and electricity. I can see that being used again and again throughout the different ward panel decisions here. I think that one of the strengths, well, there are many strengths, I think, to the Community Investment Fund. One of them here that I hadn't actually considered before, but is actually the different scales of projects that are supported. So on average, we're supporting projects of around £4,000, but we've got one project at 170 and one project at more than £17,000, at 100 times different. Now, those will both be really valuable grant awards in their own right, but the ability for the Community Investment Fund to provide that scale, that sliding scale of support, regardless of how big or how small your group is or how big or how small your project is, I think is undoubtedly to be welcomed. What I've always been most impressed about within just Ward 2, as I sit on the panel and look at the applications there, but looking at the range, looking across all of the wards in this report, is the actual range of projects that come forward from the communities. So we're looking at small infrastructure projects in village halls and installing benches. We're looking at befriending groups, wellbeing groups and mental health projects. We're looking at minibuses and speed watch projects. We're looking at a lot of sports projects, and we're looking at some food and growing projects. It's testament to the wealth and diversity of ideas that have come forward from our community that the council has been able to provide the seed funding for, to take these projects for in a way that we simply wouldn't be able to do as a corporate entity ourselves. So thank you to the officers for bringing forward the report, but for actually, more importantly, for enabling the scheme to have happened over the last 4 or 5 years. Thanks to all those groups, especially who have come up with the projects and applied into the fund and actually made a difference within their local communities. And there is a group of people to whom I think we do owe a special thanks, and they maybe don't get singled out. So I would just like to, I think, maybe on behalf of the whole committee, is thank the members of the community who sit on their ward panels. They take lots of time out to put a lot of effort in to read through the applications, to sift through them, to score them, and to make sure that the Community Investment Fund is not only projects which arise from the community, but projects which have screening and approval and grant funding by community members. I'm wholly in support of continuing the Community Investment Fund, and I'm really pleased to see the results, as I say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Right. I think clearly a number of points have been raised. We've got what will to consider the position for 23-24, but further out it will be part of a transformation project. I think that is going to include quite a number of factors. We haven't, for instance, mentioned participatory budgeting. We haven't mentioned community councils here. We have mentioned local action partnerships, but certainly I think with SIFs, it has improved over the last 3-4 years. I think it's been more responsive, more nimble. I personally still find the Knowledge Hub system a bit clunky, and can that be improved? And absolutely right, Councillor Stewart, the people that sit on the community investment panels. We actually, I think, had a little bit more time this year, and certainly it does pay dividends to try and do 1 or 2 site visits with some of the, encourages community link-ups. I just ask people to note the paper and to approve that carry forward of funds for the 4 wards that haven't been fully allocated. And can we agree on that? And I think that's us finished for today.